marketing team with Synovian. We're new to the Parkinson space, so one of our mission is really to understand the needs of people with Parkinson's. And one of the things that we did do is create a live website called littlebigthings.com. Little innovations make a big impact on the day-to-day things. So we're trying to share that. We work in coordination with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, as well as with the Parkinson's Foundation and other local groups as well. So we're providing educational programs in regards with DAPS as well. So I'd just like to thank you guys for coming out, and we appreciate supporting you guys and what your efforts are out there.
Let me share something real fast. Chris is one of our board members as well, and again, has always been one of those that I can pick up the phone, call Chris at the last minute, and he's always willing. And so, Chris, we appreciate you.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Chris Clausen. I'm with CNC Home Care. We provide care for people that want to age in place, no matter whether they're at home, hospital, or a facility. We actually can care for everything from the roof to the yard and manage everything in between. The only thing I don't like to manage is your money, and we'll let somebody else do that. But we also have programs that we've established to help people with specific needs, whether they be Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or other age-related conditions. Thank you.
And as I've already said, Shelley has, and Medtronics have sponsored so many things, and thank you again.
All right, so you guys enjoyed lunch. We brought that in today, and as Mike said, anything you guys ever need, we always try to step up and help out. The subject today is medications, and it's going to be a great program. I talked to the speaker beforehand. When medications start to move closer and closer together and you're taking more and more medications, that's when you need to start looking at things like deep brain stimulation and talk to your neurologist or your movement disorder, or go and visit a movement disorder physician. So certainly keep it in mind. It's not the first thing you do, but it's certainly not the last thing that you try. We've got lots of information. We can get you connected with patients that have had the surgery to kind of talk about it more, but we're here to help and just kind of educate everyone. So stop by our booth and pick up information if you haven't heard about it, or if you're looking for a doctor to kind of manage it. We can certainly help with all those steps of it, of the decision. All right, thanks again.
Alrighty, I will move real quickly through some other things that I want you to be aware of. The Keep Moving Symposium coming up November the 17th, our second year to do this. Last year, it was free, but we sold out. There were no seats left. So be sure and register for that as quickly as possible. November the 17th, Doubletree in Richardson. It's from 8 until 2:30. We're going to be providing breakfast and lunch, and again, thanks to a number of sponsors who are taking care of that. Hopefully you've got one of the save the date cards with the topics and the presenters on there. And the other thing is Vizient Community Day that takes place right here tomorrow, across the way in the larger room. But if you haven't registered for that already, it's a chance to see the things that DAPS does. There will be 3 different stations that we rotate through. Great time had last year, and we know it's going to be a fun time this year as well, with an opportunity to see and experience what exercise looks like, non-contact boxing, and then a care partner support group. And so hopefully you'll come and be a part of that as well. 11:30 to 2:30, once again, lunch is provided. Parkinson's Moving Day Walk is coming up soon, October the 27th. Hope you'll be a part of that as well. Always want to encourage people, if you're not, to consider becoming a GEMS, and someone who gives every month, and that helps DAPS continue to do the kinds of things that we do. Today you will have found a donation envelope in your chair. That is another one of those things that we hope that you will consider as you think about the things that DAPS does. And we've been able to offer these things free for 40 years, but it's because of donations from people just like you. So hopefully you'll take that and consider making a donation as well. I want to introduce one person before I call Joe up to introduce our speaker today. And I want to ask Carrie to come. Carrie Marcus. And many of you have heard that Jill, for reasons of just spending more time with her family, has retired, so to speak. She's still working with DAPS on a contract basis. But now, when you call, the voice that you hear is going to be Carrie's. And so Carrie has stepped in and is just doing a wonderful job. And she's already reminded me of some things that when she does it, I just have to say, why didn't I think of that? You know? And so, Carrie, we are so glad to have you here, wanting people to be able to put a face with a name when you call in. So, thank you. Glad to have you on board. Joe, if you would come and introduce our program.
Thank you, Mike. Can you hear me all right, everybody? I just want to thank you, brave souls, for coming out today. We had 92 people registered, and we have 65 people that made it, so hats off to you. This was terrible weather. I wanted to say this has been a dream of mine and Michael McGiboney to have a session on medication. I've had Parkinson's for 5 years, and I've always felt the medication and managing and controlling the medications is far worse than the disease. And a lot of people shaking their heads to believe that too. And this is time today with you that'll be special. We're going to have an overview of medications and side effects with Michael. After Michael finishes, we have a pharmacy team that we'll introduce at the end of the meeting, and we're going to break in little huddles. And if you have a question about pharmacy, you'd like to have an app loaded on your phone, or you just want to talk about drugs in general, we're not going to share drugs or anything like that today, but it's your time to spend with the pharmacist. Now, let me tell you about Michael McGiboney. Michael McGiboney is a unique individual, and he offers us a very special perspective today. Michael actually was diagnosed with Parkinson's about a year and 2 weeks ago today, and had his coming out party, so to speak, at the community day is when he announced to everybody that he had Parkinson's. He has Parkinson's. He's a pharmacist. His father also had Parkinson's, so he's a caregiver. So that's a really unique perspective. He actually had 12 to 13 of the pharmacy team help put this presentation together today, because it went from really complex to real simple, and it's somewhere in between, but it's very practical, and that's good. So Michael was born in Birmingham, Alabama, but he claims to be a Texan, and that's the way he says it is. Went to school, worked as a pharmacist for over 19 years, and right now he's the director of pharmacy over Children's Healthcare Corporation of America at Vizient. So he has an abundance of experience, and he has such a sense of humor too. We're going to see that one. So welcome, Michael and the pharmacy team.
She's already lost me. Hey, Brian. Yeah. Put this cup here, which I'm certain to spray all over everyone. You're in the front row, you're in the danger zone. Again, I am Michael McGiboney. I am really, really excited to be here. Maybe you don't get it. I would show you this, but we've all got that. The hair on my arm is standing up. I'm very excited. So, obviously very passionate about pharmacy. I'm very passionate about Parkinson's. It's been part of my family for a while. My grandmother actually had it when I was in college. There's really no information about that there. And my dad had to take care of her. I watched that. And then my father had it as well. And I've been afraid of getting this ever since my dad was diagnosed. It scared me to death. And so my reaction when I was diagnosed was probably a lot different from most people. I started feeling the symptoms about a year ago in February, started getting a pretty bad shake, and I knew what it was. It just took me about 8 months to get into a doctor to be actually fully diagnosed and have him tell me what that was. But my reaction when I got it was, okay. They said, we're going to give you the best bad news we can. You have this tremor-mediated Parkinson's. It's just mainly your hand now, and I have a few other symptoms. Said it may get worse, it may not. I said, that's fine. I know what I've got now. And I called my brother, and we talked and been afraid of this and back and forth. He goes, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to have me a sandwich, and I'm going to go back to work. I got to meet some customers tomorrow. So all of that fear for all that long, it was just a massive release. And I was able to get on with my life, and I'm able to be more active and jump on this, and I feel very comfortable about this. Now, an advantage I have that I don't think most people do is I did have a lot of background knowledge. I did go to pharmacy school. I stayed awake in most of those classes. The way they teach the drugs and how they work is really different than they teach a patient. And they start out by saying, here's the way the system usually works, and here's the anatomy considerations, here's the chemistry considerations, and here's what happens when it goes wrong, and here's where the drugs start to work. So we're going to do that today, only I'm not going to spend 6 years and charge you $100,000 in tuition. So we're giving you the cut rate version of that. So that's going to be our pathway today. We're going to go through and talk about some basic bits of information that I don't think you've been able to get. Probably as a new diagnosed patient, you certainly wouldn't. And even after a while, there's some basic things that you just don't get told. But when you find out, it fills in a few gaps for you. So that said, let's roll on and talk about this. So first of all, I want to tell you this. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a Holiday Inn doctor. I'm a pharmacist. We work in the Ivory Tower in Irving, but we spend a lot of time getting familiar with these medications. My team has been studying very hard. We've had some meetings to work on this. But we'll be able to give you a lot of background and information, answer questions and suggestions, but we won't be diagnosing anything formally today. Okay, medical history. First thing I just wanted to do right out of the gate is I want to waive my Personal Privacy Act. I want to waive my rights to my medical information, because it's just easier to talk to you like that. And so I'm going to talk to you about my medical history. I'll talk to you about the medications I'm taking. I have a long list of issues. I have many, many issues. Some of them are related to Parkinson's. So we're going to talk about those today and how that affects you. So we look up, here's my issues list, and I ran out of PowerPoint, really. So I've had a history. I've had a little bit of depression, some reflux. I had a heart attack when I was 50, so that was 4 years ago. That was a special surprise. Got a free helicopter ride on that. So I got a lot of medications to go along with that. High cholesterol, hypertension, sleep apnea. I've got the Darth Vader mask. I have ADD, which you probably diagnosed that in the first 2 minutes I started talking. Interestingly, ADD is also a dopamine-mediated disease. So when I was diagnosed with ADD, actually it's right after I started working at Vizient. As a regular pharmacist, you only have to focus about 3 minutes at a time. So you're going bam, 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 bam. So very intense, but one thing to the next. And in my first week there, we did a bid analysis, and they brought in these binders this thick with a little bitty, like 5-point font in them, and they drop them on the table in front of you. And I thought, if I die and go to Hades, they're going to have me in charge of these books, because this is killing me. I was making up excuses every 10 minutes to leave the room, because it was just beating me down. So I was diagnosed with that, and that kind of fueled my anxiety about the Parkinson's as well, because that is something. But no matter who I asked or how much research I did, they said, no, those aren't related at all. So I have that. And so then I wrap up. I have Parkinson's. I was diagnosed then. I got the official one a little over a year ago, but I knew as soon as it amped up. I'd had tremors for a little while. I just had just maybe excited about life for a long time. But then starting like in that February before last, I'd lay down to take a nap, and you're laying down to watch TV, and you're bouncing your head like a basketball, and I'm like, this is just not right. And it just took so long, and I knew what it was, it just took so long to get into a specialist. I got to UT Southwest, see Dr. Dewey, who I admire and think is just a brilliant man. I'm grateful to be there, but it took a while to get in and get the diagnosis, and you just ramp up all of the anxiety and grief you could probably put together for that. So I pulled the plug on that. Parkinson's, so you can see my family. My mom was quite healthy, except once the cancer got her. My dad had Parkinson's, also gave me the high blood pressure and the heart issues. My whole McGiboney family down that line has had, the heart attack is the family thing. It's just where you choose to do that. So I don't think any of them made it past the heart attack to get Parkinson's. Brother right behind me, high cholesterol, hypertension. You see the other array of things. Grandmother, Parkinson's, we talked about that as well. So I have the history of it. Genetic discussions on and off. Is Parkinson's genetic? Is it not genetic? Yes and no to an extent, yes. But what we can say is it really depends a lot on the environment. But what I can tell you absolutely for certain is the genetics makes you who you are and creates your breeding ground for Parkinson's. It creates the set of circumstances which the disease is going to manifest. So it's going to dictate how you're going to react, how the Parkinson's is going to affect you, and very specific to this discussion today, how you're going to respond to therapy. People respond to the drugs very differently. So that's also part of your genetics. Let's roll a little further. Here's my list, and again, the border of the page was like right here, and I just didn't want to get the font any smaller. I have a few, but these are my greatest hits. The top, I take the atorvastatin for cholesterol, take the baby aspirin because I'm a big baby, bupropion, antidepressant. It also has an effect on dopamine levels, so it also helps with the ADD a little bit as well, and probably pretty good for this. Carvedilol, this is for blocking the stimulation, so a beta blocker keeps me from getting the heart from getting too jacked up. Clonazepam, that's restless leg syndrome. Have had that for a little while. Vocalin, that's my ADD medication. I don't need it right now because I am more focused and thrilled and sharp, and anymore would send me through the roof. I need to be nailed to the floor right now. Omeprazole, so this is for the reflux. Ramipril, high blood pressure. Rytary, I have 2 different doses I take. One is my standard dose, and then the other is what they say as needed. I'd call it like a rescue. When I get up in the morning, I have a hard time kind of getting on board, kind of ramping up. Everybody, I can see a lot of head nod. Morning's kind of a tough time for me. And then sometimes right along before supper, it'll be kind of tough. And then vitamin D and glucosamine, so for the joints. So in addition to that, I have some seasonal allergies, so I have an inhaler, I have the antihistamine, so I just run through the whole list with that. And then finally, yes ma'am?
Can we ask questions now, or do you want to tell us to the end?
Pardon?
Can we ask questions now, or should we hold till the end? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if I look out here and I see some really confused looking faces, give me one of these. We'll stop and we'll talk about it a little bit, but I'm happy to go into whatever discussion. So she talked about my qualifications. One of my best ones is I have very little self-respect or very little shame. And professionally, sometimes that's a challenge, but I'm going to give you full disclosure. Okay, I'm happy to tell you whatever you want to know about that. And whatever you tell me is not going to surprise me. I'm not going to run out and want to tell anybody, so we're good. The other thing that did make this is also I have Xanax as needed, so I have some anxiety issues. We can talk about that particular situation down the line. Let's further. Okay, so something in the middle. This has frustrated me for a long time as a pharmacist. So your new patient, you get specifically as a pharmacist, you get a new drug, and you didn't really get a lot of information before. You peel the package insert off the back of the bottle and you open it, and there's this awful list of stuff in there, the huge list of side effects, and it's all in lingo that you really can't grasp. Now, there's been some improvement in what that looks like. The pharmacies have much better information that they can give you, but still, when you first get diagnosed especially, you have a very complicated disease, okay? And I think that this is much more difficult than most anything else you can get. You can visualize, like a heart attack, you can visualize that. You can say you have a clogged vein, you know, he's got a cheeseburger stuck in his artery, you got to go drill that out, improve your blood flow, and you'll feel better. There's something mechanical that you can see and you can understand, and you're not as afraid of it. It's fairly consistent symptoms. Maybe the magnitude's different, but it's pretty consistent. Parkinson's is not like that at all. So it's very different from one person to the next. It's a chemical type of thing. It's hard to visualize what's happening to you. Very complicated, and these doctors that we see are some of the most well-educated neurologists, brain surgeons. So we're at the top of the food chain with people we see. They have a tough time bringing it down to explain that the way they need you to. So when you first get it, they just sort of say, you've got Parkinson's, and here it is, and it's a degenerative brain disease, and blah, 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 and we're going to start you on this, we're going to start you on that, and you need to go and get this physical therapy, and blah, here's some information for you to read. And the information is good if you've had it for a couple of years, or you've had some medical background. You can read that and make sense. Otherwise, it's hard to know where to start and make sense. And even after you've been reading it for a while, it's difficult. So the overall feeling is you already feel bad, and you understand, you know what, they've told you what you have, but you still don't understand why. You don't understand the implications or what the complications are going to be with these medications. So somewhere in the middle is the answer. We talked about the package insert. This was one of my favorite pieces of educational information that I saw. This was better than any of the most ridiculous thing I could have dreamed of. Rytary, here it is. Rytary is swallowed. Rytary is released. Then it's still available in the body. That is fantastic information. From reading that, I know what orifice to put that into, and I'm gone after that, okay? So we're going to shoot somewhere in between those things, okay? So let's go to the next page and see what we've got. Okay, there are many things that Parkinson is. The main issue is around dopamine. Not having enough dopamine, your dopamine receptors are not responsive to the dopamine, and you don't get the proper effect. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that does many, many other things other than just the symptoms you normally think of as Parkinson's. So what most people see and think of is this is a physical disease. You have the difficulty moving, the stiffness. It also affects, though, the smooth muscle inside. So you have trouble swallowing, you have the GI difficulties, but that's one function. That's regulating movement control, so that's skeletal and smooth muscle. But it also does a lot of other things. Regulates memory and cognition, attention, okay? Regulates emotion and motivation, mood, so promotes feelings of pleasure and joy. Addiction, this doesn't probably get into this group, but dopamine is as a big component of addiction with the cocaine and the heroin and part of that. So the dependency is created. That's out of our wheelhouse. Sleep has a big impact on your sleep patterns. Motivation, I must have felt really motivated. I've had that on there twice. And then personality, this is specific to impulsivity. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. That's feeling overzealous about certain things. And there's a couple of drugs that have some very specific things here. So when you take, here's the punchline for this slide, when you take your dose of dopamine to treat that, it doesn't just go to that regulate movement control in the muscle. It's the shotgun. It hits all of these and can have an effect on any of these receptors, which can lead to a long string of side effects. Okay? So it's not, so you're taking something and you feel like you're taking something for your tension, for having trouble walking. That's what you think you're taking it for. It's doing a whole lot more once you take it. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so where does it all happen? So to be effective, the dopamine has to attach to a receptor. So I just got the picture of a puzzle. It's very much like that. Your dopamine receptors are structured in such a way that only dopamine can attach to that, and dopamine has to attach to that receptor to have whatever effect that needs to. So there's different types of dopamine receptors, but the punchline, dopamine has to attach to all of those and have whatever effect it is that's wired back into the nervous system, okay? So here we go. So you get it in there, you got your puzzle in the place, and it starts acting wherever it's at, and that's where we start getting complicated. Let's go to the next slide. The blood-brain barrier. Who's heard about that? Who talks about that all the time? Part of your conversation. This is a huge part and a huge obstacle to your therapy, and I don't see that in much of the reading. So what the blood-brain barrier, you can think of that as your nervous system, your brain and all, are wrapped in a giant colander. So there's a tight network of capillaries that surround your brain, your spinal cord, and it's very tightly woven, and it keeps out a large number of drugs and different toxins. So very good thing, protects your brain from damage, makes it very complicated for certain types of treatment. So certain types of cancer drugs, different types of infections. It's hard to treat, not because of the organism or the site you need to get to, it's you can't get the drug in there. Dopamine cannot cross that blood-brain barrier. So that's what you need, but it doesn't cross this barrier. So your levodopa, that's why everything you see, your Sinemet, your Rytary, is levodopa. That can cross the blood-brain barrier. And it's combined with carbidopa, which doesn't have an effect on its own, but it's attached to the levodopa, carries that drug to the wall, brain barrier, lets it go, goes away. You get the dopamine, you get the levodopa through the blood-brain barrier to have its effect. So only a very small percentage of what you take still is going to get through there. So that's a huge obstacle in there. Now, you've heard the discussion. We talked about the deep brain stimulation. Now that one advantage of that is it's on the other side already. That's within the blood-brain barrier. That's implanted within your brain in the specific locations. And then, they stimulate that from the inside. So by doing that, you're getting the additional dopamine. It doesn't have to get through the blood-brain barrier, so that'll supplement additional medication you take, or it can reduce that. But this is a key limiting factor to being able to get your treatment. Okay, let's go to the next thing. Okay, not enough dopamine. What are the answers? Add more dopamine. There we go. Ain't got none, give me some more. Okay, so this is what most of us take or are on the way to taking or have taken. Sinemet CR, Rytary, that's the example of that. You can reduce the breakdown of the existing dopamine that you have. So you already have some in there, but you need it to last longer, so you attack the enzymes that break that down, and that keeps the levels up higher, okay? Use agonist dopamine, which let's just call it fake dopamine. That's a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. So it's very similar to dopamine. The shape is very similar. Chemical, it's a lot like it. It doesn't exactly fit. It fits well enough to create the reaction. So it's like that last puzzle piece, and you pound that in there to make it work. So it gets in, it has the effect, but it's not the dopamine itself. So there are a number of examples of that. Amantadine, that increases the effect of dopamine. How it works is not really well understood. They just do know that it works. And the product that had been available, the short-acting, was never used or intended to be used for dopamine, but now there are long-acting formulations that they've come out with that is that. The amantadine is one of the first things you may take, or one of the dopamine agonists would be usually in the first line of things that you would take. Okay? And then finally, some real old school is artane and cogentin. So these are called anticholinergics. So they improve the balance between dopamine and acetylcholine, so you get the better effect. These are not used that often. You've heard of, there's what they call a choline, acetylcholine has a cholinergic effect. So in pharmacy school, we learned about anticholinergics with the word SLUD. That's a beautiful word. Salivation, lacrimation, urination, defecation. So you take a anticholinergic, you get dry eyes, dry mouth, urinary retention, constipation. I vote against all of those. And most of your physicians do as well. So it's not really widely used. So those are your options. Those are the main classes. There are new drugs in development, huge amount of research being done. I imagine we'll have more opportunity, but this is our basket that we work with now, and manipulating this basket of treatment options is how we do that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so drug therapy, you're usually started out with just one product, maybe two, but usually just one product, and frequently that will work, and you'll be fine for a while. As long as you can take one product and it does what it needs to do, that's where you need to be. There's a point, though, where that's not going to give you the result that you need, or it will keep working, but the dose will get so high you'll start having other side effects. So then we start combining it with other products. You saw the different options of how to treat it, those different mechanisms. You'll start combining drugs that work by a different action. Okay? So by doing that, you can decrease the dose of each one and improve your therapy. Decrease the dose, you may add some expense, but you can decrease the dose, you can decrease the side effect profile of those. So what's the disadvantage? More expensive, harder to track. It's where, you got the one thing it's pretty easy to keep up with, but harder to track. More expensive, you do have that improved outcome, and again, we already talked about reducing side effects. I'm so excited, I get ahead of myself a little bit here. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, treatment challenges. Okay, just first up, does everybody kind of understand how we talked about how they work? Just a basic flow? Did you learn something you didn't quite know before? Make a little more sense? All right, treatment challenges. Let's go to the next one. The odd couple. This is a piece of side information, but very, very relevant to the effect and side effect profiles. When you read about the different Parkinson's medications, you'll go through there and you'll see the hallucinations, the psychosis, the fear, and the things like that happening, but they don't really explain why. Okay, this is why. So Parkinson's and schizophrenia are almost opposites of each other. So, of course, very different things affecting each, but at the core, Parkinson's is not enough dopamine, schizophrenia is too much dopamine. Parkinson's, poor receptor sensitivity, schizophrenia, overly sensitive receptors. Major side effect of Parkinson's is you start having those psychosis type side effects. You get too much dopamine, you start getting the schizophrenia type side effects. You start getting the hallucinations. That's where that's coming from. Patients that have schizophrenia, one of their major side effects that begins to limit their treatment is Parkinsonism type syndrome. So you don't think of these as being related, but they're sort of a mirror image of each other. So if you remember watching Awakenings, I don't know if anybody watched that, those patients didn't have Parkinson's, but they had encephalopathy, a variant of that, and they were all given the dopamine, not dobutamine, they're all given the dopamine, and it reversed those effects, and they started loosening up their muscles. They came alive, they're able to walk and move around again. But as the doses got higher and higher, you saw the mental control start to go. So they started getting into having the schizophrenia type symptoms. So now we have the combination therapies, and when we're treating, we're shooting the gap between there, okay? So that's where those come from. It's not a random type of thing that happens. Let's look at the next one. Okay, and then we talked earlier about the genetics having an effect on how determining how a drug works on you. Now, this is not a Parkinson's medication. This is not for Parkinson's. I've checked about 80 million times since we started looking at this. They do not have this available for Parkinson's medication. This is for antidepressants, but they can do a genetic profile on you and check for different enzymes that you have, and based on that, they can start you with the right medications or closer to the right medication. So these, in this particular case, they can use just as directed. If you respond less to it, then it says use as caution. And this is your big list of ones. They say, no, this particular person does not have the metabolism, the enzymes, and the genetic structure to break down this drug, and you should not use it. So this is related to antidepressants, and they haven't found this kind of information for Parkinson's, but this is the kind of scenario we all have going on. We're all going to process this a little bit different. We're all going to respond to that a little bit different. We're going to have to change our doses and change our therapies different. So we love to exchange our ideas and get together and talk about it, but that's when it's just hard. I may start at, this lower dose 3 times a day, and you may have to start, and we look the same, not get the same effect. So tremendous variance from one person to the next in how you respond to the drugs. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, side effects. We talked about that package insert that you look at, either package insert or the information that you'll get from reading the journal. Internet's a beautiful place to be, but you can get into some very rich information, let's just say. It gives you a lot of information, it gives you a lot of numbers, but doesn't really tell you where they belong and how to apply those. Here's a big takeaway I want you to have. The probabilities listed in the literature for number of patients, of percentage of patients having a specific drug that might have a side effect, not the probability that one person will be. Let me say it again without trying to read sideways. The information that you read that lists the side effects and the percentages next to them, that's talking about the number of people who were in the test that had this side effect. That doesn't mean that that's the percentage of time that that's going to happen to you, or the likelihood that's going to happen to you. So that's easy to misinterpret. Now, if there is something in there where they say 80% of the people, well, you can feel pretty sure that you've got a pretty good chance there. But overall, when you're looking at that, those probabilities are for the number of people within a population that are likely to get that. So don't be put off at the beginning. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this is a beautiful chart. These are screenshots, sort of cut and pasted, for about 6 of the medications that I take. This is a list of the side effects. So, ta-da! So, if I look at this, there is almost nothing negative that I can physically or mentally feel that I can't locate on this set of symptoms at any given time. Whatever I'm feeling, it's like going, pinky cramp. Wait, pinky cramp is over here. I'm reacting to this. My God, it's awful. Okay, so this is what the list looks like. And the way they put this together is they do the drug studies, anything that can be remotely connected to that medication they put on that list. Okay, so it's a huge list. Now, there's obviously a couple of duplicates in here. I hope there are. And so this is part of so I have double this list of things. And this is where I'm going to talk about where I get a little psychotic, because I know that this doesn't really depend on me. But I read this book recently called Incognito. It's talking about how your brain functions. It said your consciousness is like a little boy on top of your subconsciousness, which is like an elephant. And so my subconsciousness starts thinking about this all day long. It's processing, and whenever I feel a twitch or my stomach hurts, my elephant goes racing through the shopping mall while I'm trying to calm myself down and think about it. Okay.
Is pregnancy on there?
Probably so. Yeah, probably. Wait a minute. Is that a shot? Okay. I'm double mic'd, so that may be it. I'm kind of self-conscious to do that. So when you look at that list, I take all of those medications. I'm still alive. I'm still here. I'm walking around. I'm doing good. So how do we think about side effects? Let's go to the next one. First of all, do not put them on a giant PowerPoint and sit there and look at it. Don't use that as your screensaver. Okay? These are the side effects that are potentially caused by the drug action on dopamine receptors. So we talked about what the receptors do, and this is certainly not a list of all of the things that can result from your Parkinson's therapy, but almost all of them cause a very similar set of side effects because the net result is they're raising that dopamine and they're getting that up to that higher level where you can have those mental things, you can start having the unwanted muscle movements, all of those type things. Those when you get too high, and then down low, of course, you're shooting the gap. So this is the downstream effect of having the drugs act on those receptors in an unwanted way. So muscle, so smooth and skeletal, involuntary movements, time off, the nausea, constipation, joint pain, flu symptoms, all of those type of things can result from that. Emotion and motivation, I've kind of grouped these together. So the impact on that, depression, anxiety, apathy, loss of interest in normal activities, difficulty concentrating, mood swings. Now, some of these are part of your normal Parkinson's too, so it's kind of hard to tell. So you want to look for things. We're going to get to the next slide. I'm getting a little ahead of myself again, but you're looking for these things when you change therapy. So regulating memory and cognition. This is one that can most clearly be tied to a medication. It's a pretty certain thing. So this is impulsivity, and this is specifically related to those dopamine agonists, and you have difficult to control urges for eating, gambling, sex, and shopping. Gambling seems to be the favorite thing. I've read a number of stories about people who've ran up some significant gambling debt on that. So that's uncontrolled desire to do these things. Unfortunately, most of these things are fairly obvious, and you can correct that by just backing down the dose. It doesn't mean you need to stop taking those very helpful medications. You just need to step down. So, you come home and you or your loved one who has Parkinson's, you come home and you got a sea of pie on your countertop or empty pie pans and a fork. You got an issue. You come home, you got the wall of Amazon boxes around the front gate. you've got an issue. But this is something that that is pretty easy to fix, but it's fairly profound when it happens. And this, along with a couple of other things, they're problems for you and how you feel, but they're also problems for your relationship. So your relationships with others. And one here that really hits me with my father was the apathy from up there. And as a caretaker, that really frustrated me with my father, because he had this a while ago. He was diagnosed in the mid-90s, and they didn't have a lot of options. They certainly didn't have a group like DAPS where he could go to and get support and help. But still, there were things, I could say, Dad, you're all been up. Let's take some yoga classes. Let's go walk. Let's, watch our diet. And he just didn't seem to care, and that makes you as a patient feel bad. As a caregiver, it's even worse. It's so frustrating. And so that's something to certainly be on the alert for, and it probably involves manipulating some other things, your depression levels and all. Sleep, insomnia, and unusual dreams. I'll tell you my story. I took Azilect for a short while. So the sales pitch from the doctor was going, okay, we're going to give you this medication, and we're not sure you'll even know you're going to be taking it or not, but it is thought that it may delay the onset of symptoms. And I knew this particular drug class called MAO inhibitors has a long list of side effects, and it's used for depression and some other things. So I sort of let that prescription sit for a while, and I said, what the heck, I'm going to try this. So I started taking it, and with most of these drugs, you can't just start at the top, you got to ramp it up. And it did not do me well at all. So I started having outrageous mood swings. My sleeping patterns were really shot. I'd wake up at odd times, and I started waking up at 3:30 in the morning. Not wake up at 3:30 in the morning, I'm going to go to the bathroom and swing through the kitchen and get a Pop-Tart. I'm going to go do my taxes for next year. It's like wide awake. But the volatility that I started feeling and the emotions that just didn't match what was going on my wife's back there kind of laughing at me about it. And it took her a while to notice there was something wrong. That was what was fine. But that was significant, and I had to back down off that. But I don't know if that was that drug causing it, or it could have just been an interaction with something else, because I'm taking so many other things. But I just had to stop. So let's go to the next page and look at that. So when do these occur? It's usually when there's some type of change happening. Not always, but most of the time, you're going to have the changes and interactions when you're starting your therapy, when you're changing the dose, and it also can be starting and changing another drug that you've been taking. And in time, it gets a little harder for you and the doctor to work out what's causing what, But almost always, whatever the new thing is, like I started taking the Azilect, it was probably an interaction, but I'm taking 12 other things. I ain't got time to work through that whole list and find out what's working. I'm generally okay without it, so that was the one I backed down on. So starting therapy, changing dose, changing to another drug. Interactions also occur. Interaction is when is a side effect. It's created when multiple drugs are taken at the same time. Now that's a little easier when you're only taking a couple of drugs. You're taking 2 or 3 drugs, and then you add another one in there, then that's pretty easy to work out that that's happening. If you pull down a list of potential interactions for the medications I'm taking, it's going to look a whole lot like the PowerPoint of the side effects, but it's all working right now, so it's all working. There are other things that you can do that may change the effect on that we'll get over. Let's go to the next slide. And also discontinuation of therapy. For any of your medications you're taking for Parkinson's, if you don't like them, usually when you start these, you'll know you had to ramp up on those. You start with this dose, you move up a little, a little over about a month. Do not stop that without backing down the other side, because it will be a very unpleasant experience for you. Okay, so you need to make sure you get in touch with your physician. Say, this isn't working for me. I'm going to need to take something else. And they will help you work through a schedule to increase the dose of the other medication, or sometimes you have to completely deplete that you're on already. These are working with those receptors. It's a biofeedback type mechanism. All of a sudden it's not there. You're going to start getting some really nasty reactions to that. Now this also applies, we're talking about Parkinson's, this also applies in a very similar way to antidepressants. So I went on a trip one time, me being an obviously well-informed professional, I forgot my Wellbutrin. I didn't put it in my little pill tray thing, and I didn't really notice because it's not something where you take and then you feel better lately, but about 3 days afterwards, I started feeling dizzy and the whole side of my face started tingling and my lips felt like they were swelling. And I go back and I look at what I'm taking and I forgot it. I had to get the refill and call and do that. But it is so intensely uncomfortable. So when something is not working for you and you think it's time to change, you want to have that discussion with your physician. Now, we step back and we think about this and making that change. When something isn't working for you, you should talk to your physician. If something's not working for you and they're happy with it, you're going in and they're saying, oh, you're great. You're doing awesome. We can just keep doing this. Thanks. Come back in 3 months, 6 months. You need to be monitoring and looking for the things that are important to you. So there's certain clinical effects you need to treat. In medicine, we have something called clinical significance when you talk about a side effect. So that means there are side effects, but it's doing the thing it's supposed to do, and it's worth putting up with some of those side effects. Well, I'll tell you the other definition for a clinically significant side effect, something's happening to me that I don't like, and it needs to be part of yours as well. And you need to be assertive in having those discussions. So you're in control of your therapy too. You may ultimately have to take that. And as you move further and further into your therapy, your options may shrink down. But remember, you have a lot of ownership in this, and you should be very assertive about exerting that and bringing things up and being a difficult patient. Remember, they're working for you, and they do hard work, but they need to feel the pain a little bit too. It's your duty to share it. It's your chance to give back, Let's go to the next slide. Okay, how do you know when it's time for a change? Trends. Think about a trend. You want to look for a trend of something not being effective. Having it not go well for a day or a couple of days, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I'm going to put the brakes around this and say anytime you're taking something or not and you feel chest pain, you're having trouble breathing, you break out in a hideous rash, call the emergency room, stop taking it, go and move. Don't wait a couple of days to see if this is a possible side effect. That's a drop and roll situation. Outside of that, if you'll think back before you had anything wrong back with you, when you were a glorious young child dancing through the meadows, there were some days you felt great and some days you didn't. And still, there's some days you have high energy, low energy, and Parkinson's is going to be up and down like that as well. How you feel is going to be different from one day to the next as well. So you may have dietary changes can affect the way your drugs work. Exercise level, you're cranking up your exercise and all of a sudden your body doesn't need quite as much medication, but you're starting to have side effects you didn't have before. So maybe it's time to make an adjustment. Travel. I think I repeated this a few times in here. Traveling can, across time zones, can throw you off a little bit, especially if you go for more than a couple of days. And in my case, what's happened to me a couple of times is going from Dallas time to West Coast time. So you go to a meeting in Vegas, so I'm not out partying it up anymore that much. But still, I go to Vegas, and in Dallas, I wake up at 5 o'clock no matter what happens. So I'm waking up at 3 o'clock out there. I can't go back to sleep, so I'm just awake all day. And then you're going out not until your usual time, where you're going to bed then at 8 or 9. You have an event that carries you on till 10 or 11 at night. So you're not going 2 times. It's not 2 hours. It's 7 hours. It's 8 hours. You've gone to Paris. Well, not to Paris, at Vegas, but you've gone to another. It's a big change to your system, and that really throws me off. And I try to keep on my original schedule. And I even talked to the physician before I went, and I said, this happens to me before. What do I need? And they said, just stick to your regular schedule, but then take the additional doses as well. And that helped. So I was in Phoenix from Sunday until Thursday, and I was cooking along pretty good until Wednesday night. And by Thursday, it was not pretty. I was able to still do the show. It looked like I meant it on Thursday, but it took a couple of days to get back in rhythm, because even when you're changing your schedule of medications, your biorhythms and your levels of hormones and neurotransmitters, those are on some type of circadian rhythm, and they're not really matching up either. So you get them fully switched, and then you switch it back. So a couple of days probably isn't that big of a change, but think about it and even have a discussion with your physician if you're going on a longer trip and you're going to be running on a schedule very different from your regular one. Sickness, you get a cold, flu, anything like that, you get dehydrated, you don't feel good, that affects the distribution of your drugs and how that works. And sleep, biggest thing on here. If you're not sleeping well, your drugs aren't going to act the same. You get changes in your sleeping pattern, your drugs aren't going to work as well. You get changes in your sleeping pattern. It could be related to the drugs you're taking. So you want to look for a trend. Yes, sir?
I was not clear on what you were saying about if you travel, for instance, and you go to a different time zone, you wake up at a different time. Are you better off trying to stay on the schedule that you always had, adjust your timing based on your home base? Or would you change it to match up? Well, what are the issues with changing it? Because you go to different places.
Yeah, the short answer, things go off the rails. I try to stay on Central Time. So I try to stay on that exact. So I wake up at 5 in the morning here and I take my medication. If I'm in Vegas and I wake up at 3, that's when I take my medication. I try to get to bed early that night. Inevitably I do. But still doing that. But what that may result in is, rather than taking it 4 times a day and my last dose being at 8, I may take another dose at midnight. And that will help you go for a while. But for me, somewhere around 5 days is the breaking point where things start to really come unglued. But as much as you can, by all means, go to Hawaii, go take your vacation and all. But if there's a way you can keep, within a couple of hours of your normal time zone, I think that'll help. But what they told me when I asked specifically in about 3 different ways, just enough to where I knew they'd heard me. When they get irritated with you, then you ask enough. So I always go to that point and then maybe ask again. So they said, do the extra dose. So that's what I did in this last time. And again, I was in Arizona, essentially 2 hours, but essentially 4, given the schedule I was on. And I did okay for about 4 days. Around the end, I started coming off. Now, eventually, you would get used to that. But if you're not going to be gone a long time, try to stay as close as you can. Now, 1 hour, one way or the other, I can go back and forth to the East Coast, and I just don't miss a beat. I just take everything, and I feel almost the same anyway. But especially if you're planning on a vacation, and I'm just going to throw down that 4-day amount because that's what's beat me down.
That seems consistent with what has worked for me, so it helps me kind of reinforce that.
It really does. And you know, you've got your alarms and your stuff set, and whatever that system is, you can kind of adhere to that. You don't have to do something different to try to keep up with it. And I'd asked specifically because about 6 months later, I went on another trip out there, and then I did not do this well. And I was a train wreck for 2 weeks afterwards. It took me a while to get back on track. So traveling is, think about your time zones and then your lifestyle change when you get there. Okay, how am I doing on time? Am I going like way over my limit? Man, I've been rattling on for a long time. Let's move on and then get our people up here. We've talked about this transition of therapy, so that's important. So all of this means is start a new dose, start a new product, taper down, taper up on the new one. Next. Okay, skip that. We've already covered that. Thinking about side effects, we already discussed this. It's something that is inevitably going to happen. You're going to have them. So main thing, be assertive about what you're willing to trade off for. Be the difficult patient. And then again, there's certain side effects that are going to tell you it's time to change that. Okay, let's go again. Taking it all in, literally. Let's talk about some med management strategies. Medication mismanagement, this is just some standard facts. Taking your medication on a regular schedule is hard. You know, as a pharmacist, I didn't fully understand it. Hey, take this medication, take that 4 times a day, take that with food, and, look out for blah, 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 blah. And I wouldn't always think to the fact I'd told them that 5 times before, and they had a war chest at home. Now I have my own, I think about it better. So a large number of hospital visits are due to not taking medication correctly. Hospitals spend a huge amount of money and effort taking care of and trying to prevent medication errors. Millions, and when I say millions, I don't mean in hospitals in total, I mean individual hospitals spend that much to come up with systems to make sure your medication's right. So just some basics, make sure you keep the list, make sure whoever's taking care of you has a list, and you update your doctor if there's a change while you're in the hospital. I'm blowing past these because I've got some more slow down talk. Keep track of medications with pill reminders and organizers, taking consistently. That's the way you're supposed to do it. So we all do that real easy, right? Now, let's slip over to the next page. So the best method to track your medications is the easiest one for you to use. Okay? We're going to talk about some really cool software and some stuff, but the best thing to do is the thing that you can keep up with. Whatever system you've got, no matter how ridiculous it feels or how much it irritates people with you, you stay with that system if that works, and don't change that. Don't experiment. Let's go to the next one. Barriers to compliance. Why is it hard to keep up with? Expensive. A fear of side effects. Complicated schedules. So having to keep up with that. Food considerations. This one in particular, with the carbidopa, doesn't do well with protein. You know, taking it with high protein. So what does that do? That means you can't really take it with your meals. And when's the most convenient time to take medications? With your meals. I don't have any other events in between that I can correlate it with, so that creates an issue. Travel, I beat that into the ground. Busy lifestyle, it means if you're in the office, you've got a lot of stuff moving, a lot of calls coming in, you can overlook, or your reminder come up and you go, got it, and you never do. You take it, you hit the button, that's not the same. So let's go to the next step. Okay, parts of the medication. Container, it's a very big, very important thing, what you carried in. You need to have a good system for that. Clear understanding of your dosing schedule and all the considerations. Make sure you understand all the timing issues and what you can take it with, what medications not to take that with, and taking and tracking doses. Next slide. Containers, ideally, it should hold everything that you need, and it should be portable. You should be able to carry that around, and you should be able to pack that and get that ready for a week. It needs to be portable, and it also helps to have kind of a to-go box. Here's sort of my kit here. So before I had my Parkinson's, I was able to get away with this, and I only took the medication twice a day. But now I've had to go to an ancillary, I've had to go to a satellite case here to help me for my doses during the middle of the day. I take some at 9:30 and some at 1:30. And it's important to have this separate one. Let's see where this is at. An important thing about whatever you carry your medication is when you take it, it's gone. It's not in the hole you keep it in anymore. So if you carry in your medication in a vial with you, that's the worst system you can think of, because you say you're going to take it, you check it off your list, or you mark it on your pad, and then later you go, the phone rang when I took that. When I clicked that, did I take that or not? It's embarrassing how much that happens to me. I was hating myself and wondering about my skills as a professional when Joe Klein admitted to me this happens to her before. So I said, I'm okay. I'm okay now. I've had a couple of times where I thought I've taken it. I've been at work. I've got a big whiteboard next to my computer that has the times in big letters on there, and I check it off when I take them, and then I mark it on there. But yet sometimes still a couple of hours later, I start shaking. I'm thinking, first of all, it's like, how much coffee did I have this morning? You go, no, it's not that. I'm sure I took it, and I push back from my desk, and it's like sitting there on the carpet. I'm like going, you can't take it out. You got to put it in your mouth. You got to swallow it. So even when you've got a system, you've got to slow down and keep up with that. So holds everything for a week, portable, to-go box, so you don't want to carry the big case with you all the time. Easy to get into, secure enough not to pop open. Place in a Ziploc bag while traveling. Everybody can guess the story behind that one that's happened a couple of times. So I put that big puppy down in my suitcase, and you open it up and everything is all in there, and you've got an adventure going. Next slide. Okay, so you've got a checklist that you've written out. You've got your app that tells you when to take it, and your alarm's going off. You got all that system right, or you got a checklist on an index card that you're checking off when you take that medication. But if that box isn't loaded right the first time when you load it at the beginning of the week, you're not going to be right for the week. You're going to have problems maybe for a few days. That's what happened to me when I went on that trip and didn't have my antidepressant in there. So what I do, now I'm sure each of you, if you had 5 medications in that compartment for Monday morning, you'd open it and you check them off and you take those one at a time. Not really, do you? I open that, I put the whole shovel full in my hand, I slam it down and I drink the water, and I knock it down, and I check off everything that it says would do at 5 a.m. And if it wasn't in there, I didn't get it, and I don't know. And sometimes my wife will come back and she'll go, I found this little white pill on the floor. Is this yours? I'm like, I don't think it's the dye. Sure, whatever. I just assume, it looks like I take so many. I'm like going, I guess that's mine. I'll go ahead and take it. So I'm fine. So make sure that that's loaded correctly. If you've got someone with you that can help and verify that and help you check that out, once you check it off that first time, you're pretty good to go. But make sure that that's done right. Whether you keep that list on a piece of paper, on a note card. I use an index card with all my medications listed on there, and I've got it made into a chart, and every time I load it, I check off the list that I've loaded each one, and if I'm loading my container and I've only got through Wednesday, next to that drug I don't have it, I'll put a big W and circle it. That means I need to fill that, get that refilled and put that in there. So once that's in there, that's pretty good. Also, your medical record, your account with your doctor, a lot of times you can go on there. That's a great place to get your medication list. But nonetheless, loading is highly underestimated because it just destroys the rest of your system. Sometimes it is self-limiting, and you correct it pretty quick. If you miss a dose of if I miss my Rytary in about an hour and a half, I know I did not take it, so I start looking for it or checking to see if it's there. If you didn't take some of these other medications, you may not know it for a couple of days. So some of those dopamine agonists, you may go a couple of days and start feeling really bad before you realize you haven't taken it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So apps, we're coming to the end. People here are all getting frothing at the mouth, ready to do some counseling. Practical problems for Parkinson's, hard to see. You need the steady hand to be able to use that, really setting it up. You need to be comfortable with technology. You need to be somebody that checks your phone a good bit. You know, if you're just somebody who puts your phone in your pocket, you're not looking at it, then that is obviously not going to work. It needs to be something you have regular interaction with. You know, best if it's another appendage. So, you know, you're carrying it and you're looking at it all the time. On the other end, I look at mine all the time. I get so many notices. Sometimes I'm just overloaded and I don't pay attention. So it doesn't work as well for me. Again, travel issues, you need to make sure that dosing time shifts. And but once these are set up, they're pretty easy to use. They can just be a little challenging getting going. So let's talk about those really quickly. And my other thing, being from Alabama, I use small words and I talk slow, but I go off on a lot of irrelevant tangents, which drags out the length of my presentation, which I'm doing now. Multiple functions to these apps, so even if this isn't your main thing you use to track your medications, there are other benefits. You got a list of medications with you all the time, so, and there's a way usually to send that list to the doctor or whoever you're at that needs to get that, have drug information, have photos of the drugs on there. Just a quick note, if you find one of those pills on the floor and you don't know what it is, you can look on them and they're all individually labeled. So you can go into Google and type white oval P32 or whatever's on there, and it will say this is an omeprazole 30 milligram tablet. And that's a free thing. That ability to look that up used to cost like $500 a month at the hospital to do. It lists interactions. You keep your pharmacy contact information, reminders, track compliance, and you can also link up to give alerts to your caregiver so they can come and get you when you don't take it. Okay, let's go to the next one. So just examples, I showed you my big bucket. Got a couple of apps we'll talk about. So MediSafe, this is one I use. Joe Klein is a WebMD. We've had a bitter struggle between the two of us about the best of them, sort of the, you know, Crips and Bloods. So let's go through here. We've got an angry group here. So medication reminders, they both have the different reminders that pop up, tell you when it's time to go. Gives you the big picture. You can see, again, these numbers you can plug in. Another side note, when you go to the pharmacy, if you get back and they have something in there that does not look like what you had before, always check that out. Even if it's the same size and shape and color, you can Google and read it to make sure that it is the same thing. I would call them back anyway and make sure. Okay, next slide. Okay, there's the reminders. Look at Joe's beautiful check marks all the way down. I'm not showing you mine. Example application, so this is free. Costs you nothing to do this. Let's go to the next one. And there's the full set of options available for you. And again, it's got the picture, and you can look and get all the drug information you got there right in your pocket. Next slide. This is the MediSafe, so this is the one I use. It lists the current drugs you're taking. Let's go to the next slide. There's a reminder. Sometimes I get the ones and it covers the whole page. Mine makes a sound when it's time to take it. It goes shik, 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 like you're shaking a vial. Now, I wear hearing aids and I'm not wearing them at home and I don't hear that very well. So when mine goes off at 8 o'clock, it goes shik, 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 and I don't hear that. But it still works because my wife goes, "Will you turn that off so I can watch TV? Did you take your medicine?" So it's still very effective to use. So it's an excellent product still. Okay. And the other thing that the MedSafe does have is, in addition to adding the medication, you can add MedFriend. So that's someone that would get all the alerts that if you don't get those yourself. And I think that just about wraps it up. So in the back we have our pharmacy people. Stand up. Now I've been working with our team since like last May, and I've had a lot of people helping me out and helping me get ready for these. And these are the ones that I've got to bring in and come help do the show with us. They're going to help. They're going to answer all of your questions. And they may even avoid this. They may even do some diagnosis and all. So we've got Bill, have April, Mitchell, Karina. Do we have anybody else hiding back here? There we go. We got Jermaine who can help load some app stuff. So this is the group we've got to help you out with that. Anything else?
All righty, Michael, thank you so very much.
Thank you. I think I talked a little too long, but I hope we gave you something here. Thank you.
Revisit some things real quickly, and then I'm going to give Jill the mic. She's going to talk about some logistics if you want to hang around and visit with some of the other pharmacists. I want to remind you real quickly about Community Awareness Day tomorrow. We've got a place to sign up out at the registration table outside. Would love to see many of you come back and join us again tomorrow. And then let's be careful to thank all of those who had a part in making this happen today. Medtronic, Atura, Synovian, CNC Home Care, all of our Vizient volunteers, even beyond the pharmacists who were here. Marcella, you may have noticed, is filming this at the back. Marcella helped us film something last year for our non-event, so I want to thank Marcella for that, and then all of the other volunteers as well. So let's give them a hand and thank them. And then give us one of these who are here. Joe's going to